All right, welcome to the June 18th, 2024 City of Erie Planning Commission meeting. A little roll call here. Mark Klecker, President. Rich.
Here.
President. Tony.
Present.
All right, Colin.
Present.
Jason, you online?
I am here.
All right. Thank you. Everybody. Nice. Everybody read the minutes?
Yep.
Yes,
You have any problems?
I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
All right, first.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. The Wayne Equity District Neighborhood Plan needs an endorsement. We have anybody here?
I think, Hannah was going to be here to present. They're upstairs?
Oh,
Okay.
Here comes,
this
Here
is
they are.
Here
basically
they
a
are.
follow-on from a few months ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, they want to get.
yeah.
You're up first.
I need an agenda. Do you have an extra agenda?
I have one here. I was gonna say I have one here.
He's gone.
Thank you. You already did roll call?
yeah,
Jeez, we're really late. And we're on. Okay.
And you're up.
And you're up. Okay. Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Good afternoon. How's everyone today? I would like to just give a small introduction. You met Hannah Moran from Build CDC at, I think, last meeting, the April meeting. She presented at that time the Wayne Health, Wealth, and Equity District. We were not requesting any action at that time. She just was presenting to you. They had completed a neighborhood plan in March of 2023. I believe you received that plan. I hope you were able to review it. At this meeting, the Build CDC, which is Hannah Moran, who's the project manager, and Daria Devlin, who's the executive director of Build CDC, which is separate from ECAT now. They are a subsidiary of Hammett Health Foundation and a nonprofit. Hannah is requesting that you vote on this plan and recommend it to City Council for full adoption. The plan in itself is very, very well written. It also is in alignment with the Erie Comprehensive Plan in terms of the Pulaski and Lighthouse District, strengthening our neighborhoods. And in the plan, I just wanted to mention that there are three focus areas of the plan: creating pathways to whole homes, supportive, inclusive and creative entrepreneurship, and reimagining our way on East Avenue. Those are the three focus areas. In the plan, it also has a implementation or an area to make sure that they're measuring their progress. And so the City of Erie would like to say that we are very much in support of this plan and hope that you approve it today. And I'm just going to let Hannah say a few words.
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, nice to see you all again.
Hello.
Hi, Jackie said so many things that were so lovely. So thank you again for letting me present to you back in April and share our plan with you and answer any questions that you had at that time. If you have any further questions, I'm happy to answer them. But ideally, as we mentioned in our last meeting, and especially after you recommended some grants to us that were available, I just want to emphasize that we would love to have the City Council's adoption of this plan. I think it would really strengthen us moving forward and allow us to apply for some grants and some funding and really get the backing of the city to be able to implement this plan to the fullest extent that we can with our neighborhood support.
All right. Thank you. Have you guys looked it over again?
yep.
You emailed it.
Are there-
Refresh.
Were there significant changes from what you'd sent us or presented before to this plan?
In April to now?
Yeah.
No, not at all. It's the same plan, and if anything, the projects that I had highlighted last time that we were hoping to do within the Equity District, we're just 2 months further along on doing those events and those plans and those developments, doubling down on our investment in that ECAT Wayne building and in the neighborhood at large, and continuing to do more inclusion events of our neighbors to help them advocate for what they would like to see in the neighborhood.
Okay.
So I think is probably gonna be an easy one, but before, we've anyone moves to vote on it, I guess, what are the big next steps, or what are the big accomplishments, I guess, this summer, the rest of this year that you guys anticipate making?
Yeah,
or
we're
hope
very
to?
excited about the Wayne campus expansion. So I mentioned that last time. That is expanding that from the ECAT Wayne building, the old Wayne School, into the Wayne Park Baptist Church. We are in the early stages of that, but really looking forward to sharing that with all of our neighbors in a much splashier way than we have been able to so far. We're also putting in a UPMC neighborhood health center there on East Ave. And that's going to be a game changer to allow our residents to have telehealth access if they don't have broadband at home, and to do a lot of programming around health and nutrition in that space. That is a very trusted space there on East Ave, and something that has been vacant for some time. So to be able to make that vibrant and revitalize that space is something we're all looking forward to a lot. We're also partnering with the City of Erie and UPMC Health Plan to host a combination health fair and 814 concert this summer. We've been doing it for a couple of years now. This is our third annual, and the Blue Coats will be hosting a barbecue, and we'll be hosting a huge health fair with lots of resources, and then tying that into Love Your Block celebration of the projects they're doing around the East Ave corridor, and then of course the concert. That's a huge event that we're looking forward to hosting, bigger than ever in response to our community's needs. And then we're continuing to host our Pay What You Can markets. So something that came directly out of our community survey was the need for fresh produce. And this is sort of a stopgap measure to a larger hope for more food security projects on East Ave. But it does infuse our neighborhood with fresh produce that's grown within the city limits that's culturally appropriate for our neighbors. So last year we only did a couple of dates, and this year we're there every Wednesday from 4 to 6. And our neighbors are really looking forward to it. They ask all the time when it's starting up, and we're very proud of that project as well.
And then I had a question.
Yes, absolutely.
Actually, on the Pay What You Can market, I really like that, and I was reading about it, but you said it's a lot of fresh produce. I was asking where it was coming from, if you were doing a green space or anything like that, but you said it's within city limits?
Yeah, so we source a lot of our produce within the city limits. So we actually harvest from East Middle School. We have formed a beautiful partnership with them. Their garden goes to seed in the summer because the students are there to curate it, and so we take over that garden space and harvest the produce and then make sure that it's ready for them when they come back in the fall. We purchase from Grow and Glow Urban Collective. That's Kristen Week. She has been our staple farmer from the start. We purchase from Wildfield Urban Farm, which is also within a mile and a half of ECAT. And then we have a lot of city gardeners who donate additional produce to us. And if we absolutely need to bulk up what we present to our neighbors, we do buy from the county. We have farmers who come in for SSJ&N's market on Mondays. We purchase from them there.
Okay, because I was only asking because I know I couldn't figure out, and I tried to look it up, if there were any WIC offices down there, because I know that WIC also does that, and they have their farmers markets checks and things like that, and I didn't know if you were participating with them or looking to participate or anything. I just had questions about the market, but.
Yeah, we're hoping to infuse a few more resources this year. Last year was sort of a pilot where we were trying to see what the response would be from the community. We do take FMNP checks, but we'd love to have folks there to help navigate the SNAP and 50/50 experience for our neighbors too. To sort of like funnel those resources into that safe space now that we've formed it.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you so much for your questions. We love the market and we love our neighbors' response to it. It's one of
And
our
I
favorite
like
things.
the almost like a self-sustainability aspect of it, so.
Yeah, we're trying to keep it all as hyper-local as possible and really reinvest in the urban farmers here in the city who are making great waves and providing food security for our neighbors.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I might have missed it in the plan, I apologize, but in terms of internet access, I know that the east side is consistently maps to be one of the areas that there is that digital divide. Obviously, there's been a ton of funding at the state and federal level. I know VNet got, I think, a chunk of it. Is I guess, bringing in fiber, bringing in, high-speed internet to the community part of the plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually something we've been talking about recently. We have had some conversations about broadband internet and what that could mean as we expand our campus. And is there a possibility of making that space also someplace that's accessible for people to access internet resources? So we have applied for a grant where that is a component. So it's a little too soon to say. It's a couple of months out before we hear back, but that's something that's certainly on our minds. So I welcome that question because I think we're in alignment there on that need as well.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Anything else?
One more, sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
I thought of it afterwards. You were talking about the bring in the clinics and stuff like that, and work with UPMC, so they can access telehealth. Will you have any professionals on staff locally there as well to help people out, kind of like a community office or anything, or is it just going to be telehealth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the staffing will really happen at the Pittsburgh level from UPMC, but I do know they're hoping to have some on-site staff there consistently. And one of the great things about the Hammett Health Foundation and UPMC is that we have 3 people on our staff, of which Bill is a part, that are community health workers, and they are fully trained in that space. And 2 of them are also enrollment navigators. They help people understand insurance and all of the things that come with that could be a barrier to people accessing healthcare. So those 3 folks we hope to embed in that space very frequently, and they are known to the neighborhood, and they are trusted, and one of them is listed here in the plan. So we hope that they're able to act as that point of care for some of those folks for their needs.
So sorry, I know we want to move on. But piggyback, I'm excited about this project.
I am
so,
too, yeah.
I know that the pharmacy at ECAT shut down a while back.
Yes.
Obviously, that's a huge loss.
Yes.
And a challenging business model to begin with.
Yes.
Is there, I'm sure that's something y'all have looked at, but is there any plan or anything kind of in the works maybe as part of this that will hope to try and move towards addressing that?
Yeah, we have certainly reached out to pharmacies that we know here locally that might be interested in taking over that space. It is, you're right, it's a very challenging model, and we had hoped that it would be successful for many more years than it was, but there's the challenge of business and small locally owned pharmacies. If there's a pharmacist owner who's listening to today's meeting and you'd like to talk, reach out. But in the meantime, while we're having those conversations, we're also on a parallel track thinking of how we can also utilize that space. We don't want it to sit vacant because it is a building where people are dying to get into to offer those resources, but we're very much keeping that pharmacy space in mind as we're looking to revitalize, all that vacant spaces on East Ave.
Awesome.
Thank you for your question.
I'm not, don't beat me. Now piggybacking off Colin, with the spaces on East Ave, like that old Dollar General building and things
Yes.
like that, do you have businesses that are already looking, or do you have ideas of specifically what kind of businesses you're looking to get into there to offer to the residents in that area?
Yeah, I mean, as these conversations have started to be more public, that we want to really revitalize those vacant storefronts, we do have people reaching out and saying, hey, I have this business and I don't like where I'm at right now, or I also really want to be on East Ave because I see what you're doing. Like, do you have storefront space for me? And my hope would be to say, yes, there is available renovated storefront space for you to move your business onto East Ave. It's just getting there is the challenge, as with all things and properties that are vacant or have been underutilized for so many years.
Okay, so you're already getting a positive community response. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Now I'm done. It's like my ears, I won't listen anymore.
Well, I'm assuming that we're going to endorse this. So,
Yeah.
so all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, historic property designation.
Hiya. My name is Matthew Falcone. I am a Historic Review Commissioner with the City of Erie. A few months ago, the federal government reached out to partner about doing a historic nomination of the federal courthouse complex across the street. And we had the opportunity to work with them on a nomination, which went before the city's Historic Review Commission this past April and was reaffirmed in May. The Historic Review Commission found that there was historic significance to the complex, which is 3 historic buildings: the former library, the old courthouse building, and the Baker building as well, which now functions as one large building. That takes us to this point in time. So the nomination process for historic properties, after it goes from the Historic Review Commission, goes before the Planning Commission for your consideration, and then goes to City Council for final designation. So all of our purviews are a little different in this process. With the Historic Review Commission, we exclusively look at the historic significance and the background of each of the different properties. With the Planning Commission, it's your purview to look and see how this fits in with the larger kind of city plan and plan for the neighborhood as well. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have, either about this process. I know this is only the third historic landmark that's come kind of through this process since the city initiated it several years ago. And so I know this is kind of a bit new to all of us, but I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
I'll go while Colin's thinking. Okay. Two-parter kind of question. I love this project because I grew up going to that library. That was my original library. But with that being said, because it's now a federal courthouse, do you have something in place to either have like a placard or something at the current library or something that's going to talk about the history, since we can't just walk in and see it now?
That's a wonderful question. So, and actually a bit of a misconception, if I might say. So everybody is still welcome to enter into the courthouse and to the former library. The Baker Building is a bit of a flux, as I think we all know it was at one point post office in its most recent history. That's vacated, and they're reactivating that space. But the interior of the library building is publicly accessible, and it still looks pristine. So I would the historical review.
Yeah, I did not know that. Okay.
I thought it was closed off. That was going to be my question.
If
so.
you would like to take a recess, we can all go over. No, I joke. But the federal government has taken excellent care of the interior of that space. They've done a full restoration, full cleaning, repainting. A lot of the original paintings that belong to either the county or the city or the now Erie Art Museum still hang in that space. It is an experience. The federal government invited the Historic Review Commission as well as a few other members of city staff to do a walkthrough a couple months ago, and we had the opportunity to see that. There's also a space that is in the kind of connecting wing between all of the buildings that talks about the archaeological finds that they came across when they were doing the construction of kind of the in-between. As well as some of the history of the building itself. So there's actually quite a lot that's accessible for everyone, but from the city's perspective, we're looking to do different things. So the nomination that was written and presented is accessible online for everyone, so it captures the history not only of the former library building, but also the courthouse and the Baker Building. And talks about their significance as well. So there's a kind of deep dive into the Baker family, as well as their importance with Erie's history of commerce. It talks extensively about the library as well, not only for being a beautiful building, but also that it's really served as the kind of cultural heart of Erie for so long. The other component to this too is that our conversations at the Historic Review Commission have really centered on signage and placards, just as you mentioned, and trying to initiate a program that makes that history a bit more publicly accessible on the street, so that those buildings that have been designated or the districts that exist within the city of Erie, there's some kind of honor kind of bestowed upon them that everyone's able to see. So that's very much in process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's great to know that it's open. That was I saw photos of it post restoration. It's absolutely gorgeous, but I was under the impression it was closed. So that's great to hear. To your last comment about kind of the recognition, I know zoning and planning have done a lot in the GIS space in terms of mapping. I'm a nerd on that stuff, so I've actually found where it is and to use it. But there isn't a great collection, I would say, that's updated of historical Erie properties. There's stuff out there, but it's hit or miss. Is that anything that has been discussed? I mean, something I guess it would be a great way to say, hey, you know, here's another asset that is now received the historical designation, and people can easily find that inventory.
Yes, and actually I will yield to the city's historic preservation planner who's done extensive work on this. And we are very excited, I think, to move forward with a building-wide survey that will look at every individual structure and place within the city of Erie to kind of recatalog over the next few years. And so that information that you're talking about would be updated. But Heather?
I figured I would just step up to add just some input real quick. So it's
Talking
hard
to the
to,
microphone,
Can you
please.
step closer, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
boy, it's hard to follow up to Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. So regarding your question, yes, we hope to have more historic properties linked to the city's GIS site and information in the future. We are just planning to start the citywide historic resources survey. The data that develops during that process will go into the state system, the PA share system, and will be accessible to anyone in the public through that site. So once that happens, there will be more opportunity for finding places, acknowledging signage, and accompanying information with those sites. So yes, we're kind of at the crux of where that's all going to come together. And this is a great nomination.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, we're good.
I thank you all from one commissioner to another for the work that you do. And at this point, what would be an appropriate course of action is that if you are in support of the nomination, find that it fits within our plans for the city, then to make a positive recommendation to City Council that they take up the nomination and make it our third historic landmark.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
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 All in favor?
Aye.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, zoning ordinance amendments. If you don't want to, you don't have to stay. I'm not telling you to leave, but you don't have to sit for the rest of this.
Now we get to the really fun stuff. Hopefully the mic's working. There it goes. So the amendments that are being presented are a follow-up to last month's meeting. There was an exhibit posted along with the agenda that shows all the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance. These are all text changes. It should be noted that the historic resource nomination that the Planning Commission just endorsed is also a zoning ordinance amendment because it will be shown on the zoning map as a historic resource. So that's just a side note there. So what you have in front of you is a pretty lengthy and but to kind of categorize the proposed amendments into different areas, what the Planning Commission has been discussing over the last several months are things like permitted uses. In primarily, we were looking at our residential districts and looking at the mix of uses, not only traditional housing, but also group housing arrangements and other quasi-commercial uses that are permitted to some extent in all of the residential, some or all of the residential districts. Those were reviewed in detail last month, and essentially the first 2.5 pages of the exhibit are a recap of all of those recommended changes to the residential districts. And that includes all districts from R1 all the way through to WR. As a follow-up to last month, I had indicated that we were also reviewing the other zoning districts and the permitted uses in those districts as well. There were, a handful of uses that we've had repeated requests over the years for use variances, for instance, in some of these other districts. So I took a look at that information, looked at the commercial and industrial districts and the waterfront districts, which was another area that we focused on as far as creating, allowing some of the uses that are currently permitted in the waterfront districts as conditional uses to change those to permitted uses. So what you have in front of you is additional recommendations of permitted uses in the commercial, industrial, and waterfront districts. I'm happy to go over those in detail if you would like.
You said the red stuff you put in this morning?
Yes, there was one area in the M1 and M2 that is not on the exhibit that was posted on the website with the agenda. However, it's fairly limited, and I will go through that. So we'll start where, with the additional zoning ordinance amendment recommendations on page 3, permitted uses by zoning district. In C1, the first two, A and B, regarding C1 and C4, we did already go over those last month. That was somewhat related to the residential uses, the accessory dwelling unit use that we are recommending be created and permitted in all the residential districts. And so that is a recap of that. We did already see that. Starting with C, permitted uses for the M1 zoning district. We touched on that a bit last month, but that would be amended to include the ADU as well, which is what we touched on, animal care, pet grooming, auto repair shop, and auto sales. Right now, auto repair, and this was the addition this morning, auto repair is already a permitted use in M1 and M2. Auto sales is not as a separate use. So the recommendation is to add that to M1 and M2. There are already existing auto sales facilities and businesses in both of those districts, and we have gotten requests to where they've had to go through a variance to open an auto dealership in an M2 district, for instance. West 12th is a good example of that. But there's some redundancy in M1 and M2 as far as auto repair versus auto body shop, auto paint shop, service garage. These are redundant use classifications, and frankly, the definition that is in the ordinance now, auto repair covers all of those items. So that's the recommendation that you see as far as auto repair shop, auto sales being added. Auto repair is really kind of already there, but we're shortening it to match the title of the definition, which says auto repair shop and not automotive repair. And then eliminate those redundant use titles as far as auto body, auto paint, and service garage. So those are the recommendations for M1 and M2, in addition to deleting the service garage definition in Article 6. So we're eliminating that redundancy, cleaning that up. That's something that's been kind of a nagging thing over the last few years, and since we're doing this rewrite, we want to cover it now. Also in M2, the recommendation is to add a special exception use, add Bottle Club to M2 as a special exception use. I think we touched on that. We've touched on that a couple times in our conversations. Bottle Club right now is limited to C3. There are buffer limitations for bottle clubs, 1,000-foot buffers to churches, schools, parks, playgrounds. Those will remain in place. That's a condition of the use regardless of the district that it's in. So this would add some flexibility to locating a bottle club. Frankly, C3 is somewhat limited because of there are several churches and you know other facilities that makes it difficult to actually locate a bottle club in C3. It's not impossible, but it's fairly limited with the buffer requirements. So that is the suggestion there for M2. Moving to the waterfront districts, and feel free to interrupt me at any time for any further discussion on any of these. But moving on to the waterfront districts, we touched on WR, and the recommendations for the other waterfront districts are basically follow suit. We're talking about creating or moving some of the conditional uses into a permitted use category for some of these uses that essentially are accessory and residential or not high-intensity commercial type uses. So things like accessory uses, essential services, which an essential service as defined in the book is kind of utility related. So in other words, like a substation, maybe a pump station, something like that. These are, you know,
The things you're not
utilitarian.
gonna stop ultimately.
Yeah, and right, municipal infrastructure essentially is what these are. Home occupations, off-street parking lots, and short-term rentals. Those are the items that we want to move into the permitted list. There's still, you know, operational conditions that need to be met, but they would not have to go through the entire conditional use approval process. And as you can see, the follow-up would be to remove those uses from the conditional use category. We're creating a permitted use category. Same thing for WC2. Essentially, it's the same uses that we are looking to take out of conditional use and put into permitted use for WC2 and also for WC3. That should really, I think, give us the consistency that we wanted for the waterfront districts to take some of these sort of ancillary uses and have it go through a normal administrative review and approval process. All other commercial uses would still go through conditional use approval and be subject to Section 306. Things like parking lots, off-street parking lots, are still subject to the design requirements. They just would not be subject to the approval process of design review, planning commission, council, public hearing, council approval. But they're still subject, any of the uses in the waterfront districts are still subject to the design requirements in the waterfront district. That really captures all of the use recommendations that we have for amendments. The other areas that we were looking at, we'll just go right into it. Lot, yard, and height requirements. You know, I think the conversation centered largely around allowing for some more density in our residential neighborhoods and some more flexibility in developing some of these areas, and looking at our existing lot and yard tables, and looking at some of the past history of development, and folks that are looking to redevelop some of our existing housing stock in R2, for instance. It can be a little bit of a challenge because of that existing lot area per family requirement. So starting in R2, that is the first recommendation, is to reduce that from 3,000 square feet to 2,000 square feet per lot area per dwelling unit. What I've seen over the years, as far as, you know, folks coming in, the existing requirement, which is a follow-up under B, is that 3 and 4 family dwellings are permitted in R2 with that 2,000 square foot per family requirement. So in essence, what you had was a 2-unit and a 3-unit had the same lot size requirement. So we want to eliminate that, make it 2,000 per for 1 through 4. That'll help with redeveloping some of these existing properties. Even to go from a 1 to a 2, that should help, because we do have a lot of 4,000 square foot lots, the relatively smaller lots, and that would allow the property owner to create a 2-unit there, where right now they can't. Moving on to the RLB district, again, similar thought process, reducing the lot area per family from 1,500 square feet to 1,000 square feet. This lines up a little bit more with our higher density residential R3 and our local commercial district, which is 1,000 square feet. You'll see that that's what it is for C4 right now. Those two recommendations, moving from 1,500 to 1,000 square feet for RLB and for C1, that'll make it consistent with C4 and R3, allow for that higher density of residential development.
I mean, that's about what Good Homes is doing at the Avalon, that revamp. They're right around 1,000 square feet, if I recall, maybe a little bit under, but I mean, that's, the fact is, I think it's the market saying, hey, there's demand for it, so I think it makes sense to try and get closer.
Yeah, and frankly, the size of residential units, the demand for, 5,000 square foot home is, and again, this is lot area, but still, just as far as the size of the buildings that we have in our residential district, they're flats are just not that big. So to go along with the C1 under E, you'll see that the max lot coverage, we're looking to increase that from 35% to 50%. That'll line up with the C4 district. It'll line up more with the C2 district and with the RLB district as far as lot coverage is concerned. We want to have a little bit more equity between some of these districts and not make one district, excessively restrictive over another. C4 is 100%. So that's one of our local commercial district that allows for 100% lot coverage, similar to C3. Fairly modest under F, looking to increase M1 from 70 to 75%. We also looked at max height. So under max height, the recommendation is to increase the max height in the R2 district from 35 to 45 and increase the max height in the RLB districts from 45 to 60. What that potentially will do is perhaps allow for an extra floor of development, which is, again, going to help us with our density. There are a lot of buildings that are, probably even with adding another floor, are not going to exceed those height limits as is. But this will allow for perhaps an extra floor, some extra density. Max height in C4 again to kind of line up with RLB, increasing from 45 to 60. Should be noted, like in R3. The max height is 100, and we do need that. Some areas where, for a high-rise apartment, I mean, that's the purpose of R3, and the density in R3 is to allow for those types of developments. So I think with these changes, we'll have a good mix of height requirements and density requirements that's going to provide, perhaps, hopefully, for some to clear any hurdles as far as development's concerned, maybe create some incentive for development. We do have an amendment. Again, this kind of falls under lot and yard. It's something that has come up occasionally for neighborhood centers. And we're looking to, there's a 20-foot side yard requirement, so we're looking to reduce that to 5. Why 5? 5 is essentially the building code spec for once you get less than 5 feet away from a property line, then there are fire code requirements and things of that nature that are going to increase the cost of development to begin with. So 5 foot is really that minimum that will satisfy building and fire code requirements. So that's a recap of the lot and yard height requirement amendments. Under off-street parking requirements, we've had a lot, of discussion on trying to look at where we stand along with other municipalities, try and reduce those requirements as to what makes sense. There were a couple things just in looking through the existing requirements that stood out to me. I thought, this would be a good time to at least address a few of those. And one of the biggest things that we talked about was the existing language as far as mixed uses, that it really didn't have any language about shared parking or an allowance for shared parking. And, we know in reality that's what in different strip plazas and different mixed-use buildings, that's exactly the way the parking is being used. It's shared amongst the different tenants within that property. But we had not really, in the zoning ordinance, made any statements to that effect. So I did come up with this statement that shared parking areas are permitted if adjacent land uses have different peak hours of parking demand. That was based on information that, I looked a lot at the shared parking guidelines and best practices, and actually the suggestion was still to leave the requirement for calculating what the total parking requirement would be based on the total of the uses, but I thought it was important to add that shared parking language in there so we have some flexibility, so that if it's demonstrated to us that the parking requirement may calculate to 50 spaces, but if you demonstrate that really 20 spaces is going to adequately serve all the uses on that property because there's different peak demand hours and different use categories, then, as long as that's demonstrated with, some parking analysis, then that gives us that flexibility. And I'm just using those numbers for as an example. I don't think there's any use that requires 50 parking spaces except for maybe the convention center.
Personally, this is the one where, again, selfishly, I want to see off-street parking requirements eliminated altogether. That's just from a more pedestrian and cyclist-focused perspective, but, again, that's just me. That's the one thing that I think that the market drives, what their parking needs ultimately are. For business to be successful, they have to have parking that meets the needs of their customers, and if they don't do that, then they're not going to be successful. If they have too much, then they're wasting money on land that's underutilized. So personally, I'd like to see, off-street parking go away altogether, but that's just me.
Well, and I think, now's a good time to point out that, we've also been looking at doing having consultants come in to do a complete audit of both the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance, and there'll be a more robust public component to that, interviewing and public component. And so I think that's something that we could put out there to look at those different kinds of off-street parking alternatives, but to try and develop some consensus on what makes the most sense for the city of Erie. It should be noted that, and you'll see that under B, A actually does, kind of
It
lighten
lowers
up
it,
on a few things.
which I think is great. It's absolutely a huge improvement over what we have, no
Right.
question.
Well, and so under B, you'll see, that right now, any new uses in C3 in general, you're not required to provide off-street parking. So we do have a couple of districts where essentially you're not required to provide off-street parking on site, and non-residential uses, if you have some parking available within 500 feet, that's acceptable. So, and that goes back to this shared parking where, we can have some lots out there that serve several different parcels, and that alleviates the stress on the existing on-street parking, because that's, in a scenario where we eliminate off-street parking requirements, well, that's at the sacrifice of the other business owners and folks who have to use the on-street system. So those are the kind of things that will need to be looked at with regards to any kind of major changes to the off-street parking. But I also wanted to add, as far as reducing those requirements by 50%, add the RLB and the C1 districts as part of that. Again, this gives us a lot more flexibility. Looking at the parcels and the properties that are in those districts, they're typically not large parcels. And so they have a hard time trying to accommodate off-street parking as it's written. So reducing those to 50% is going to be very helpful.
Yeah.
And in some of these cases, you're only talking about 1 or 2 spots. But it's the difference between 1 or 2 spots or 3 or 4 spots. And that makes a big, it makes a big difference as far as whether you can put that use on that spot. So I think it will be helpful.
The other item that we could consider perhaps going forward is an upset number of spots permitted for a particular use. You know, so that, you know, you can't have more than 100% of the required to prevent somebody from just paving a site over, you know, using it for snow storage or something like that, just for snow storage, you know.
Right, yeah, and I thought of that, and a lot of times, and that's an interesting subject just to kind of broach overall, because a lot of times these ordinances will set minimums and maximums, but sometimes not both.
Right.
So sometimes you'd like to see one or the other, or actually both.
Right.
And so that's just something I think that is kind of somewhat typical, but I think when it comes to parking, it would be good for us to try and have some language in there. And maybe we could put a blanket in there that you're not to exceed, let's say 120% of the minimum, something like that. I mean, I don't know what's typical. I haven't gotten to research that aspect of establishing maximums, but you know, I'm assuming there would be a little bit of leeway plugged in.
I mean, I think it makes sense also just thinking about the impact on, you know, the tax revenue from the city.
Right.
I mean, the paving a lot over, you know, that's gonna have one assessed value versus if the alternative is somebody builds a house there, you know, that's, we need to, this obviously has far-reaching implications, so it's definitely something to look at.
And it has a lot of follow-on implications with stormwater impacts and,
Oh, yes.
yeah, you know, that we need to be concerned about, because stormwater storage doesn't pay taxes either,
Yeah.
not really. So,
I mean, I think this is a big improvement, though. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, and any changes like this where we're lightening the burden on what is required to be paved over, I think is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and generally, I think what I've seen is most of the time, the accessory parking that is developed, they are pretty much looking at just doing what they need to and leaving their, because of stormwater management, they don't want to pave more than they have to. It just is more of a burden on the developer to do that. And, you know, and of course we encourage, you know, there are some screening and buffering requirements and things like that when these commercial uses are next to residential districts, and there's, you know, also like street trees and things. So, I mean, it helps to encourage some green space in the mix. But yeah, I think that'll be another topic for us to look at when we're kind of, you know, saying, well, when we start looking at really what are all the best practices out there. I haven't seen anything yet on establishing the maximums, but I would think something like, you know, sort of saying that it can't be more than 120%, and I just made that number up, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see something like that elsewhere.
yeah.
The next category is under short-term rental requirements, which we have been through, and we've endorsed this language previously, but I wanted to capture it again in this format. One thing that I did want to amend, and I don't recall whether we had it in our initial language or not, was just because we are looking at modifying a lot of the special exception uses and having short-term rentals be one of those uses. then I took out the special exception language in that section. I think there's one other, that kind of applies to like group homes also, because, you know, anywhere where there's a statement that says, refers to special exception, where we're saying it's not special exception anymore, then that'll be eliminated from any kind of random, under the conditional uses. I think there's a couple spots. This is one of them. So that'll be removed. But these other items, the 5 items under the R1 and R1A districts, we had, from what was previously there, we had modified we had modified the occupancy statement, the off-street parking statement, the screening statement. So those first 3 statements were, you know, we modified those to be much more specific and explicit on what the requirement actually is. As we were working on some of these other amendments, we had already written a recommendation to council on the short-term rental and the screening stuff, but we pulled that back as we were looking at these other items, and we're going to do this all in one shot now. So, but nothing has changed from our original recommendation for short-term rental and screening,
It's just cleaning up the language, it seems like,
essentially.
yeah.
Yeah, essentially. And so that's what you'll see for screening as well, you know, just a statement where we're going to be, any references to screen plantings or screen planting strip, those will be replaced with the term screening, since that's actually a defined term in our ordinance. Screen planting strip is not defined, so there's been some ambiguity there and some heartburn on how to interpret that.
I know Mill Creek's Saldo has some good illustrations in theirs on the screening requirements that might be worth borrowing loosely, just to illustrate, because I think that looking at what they've had and the changes here, I think it might be helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, there's flexibility, you know, screening says, you know, allows for fences, hedges, walls, so it gives you different material types to use. It just really, what it dictates is what the height needs to be for it to be considered a screen, which is 6 feet high. So the current definition of screening is good, provides some flexibility in what materials you want to use. And the, you know, B, which is replacing the term adjacent to, replacing that with to abutting. Adjacent is defined differently than abutting. That includes properties across the street and things like that, and we're not trying to tell people they have to put a fence all the way around the front of the property. So, and that was kind of clarified when we were looking at STR requirements particularly. You know, it's because we have site distance requirements and things like that in the front yards. We don't want to stockade all the way around people's properties.
Some little castles.
So that's, yeah, on the last page, there's a couple of sections that needed modification. The one thing that I did clarify in 30511, which is the last amendment on the page, and this is something we did go over again, but it's worth noting that what we have been, existing parking, for instance, downtown, where you'll see some parking associated with Hammett and UPMC and their campus, there's always been a screening requirement for parking lots that face the street. But it wasn't really defined as far as the height of the requirement. I scoured the ordinance and looked at what was kind of inferred in other sections of the ordinance, largely looked at section 306 on the waterfront requirements, the waterfront parking design requirements, and this is really pulled from that as far as dictating that screening to the street be 3 feet high. There was some question on that, so we wanted to make sure that was defined. So that should be, you know, give us some consistency between the waterfront design requirements and our overall design requirements for for off-street parking in the city. And that's it. That's all I have. We have any other questions or discussion on anything?
No?
I'm excited about it. I mean, I know this has been,
excited about it.
yeah, this has been a bit in the works. This is, I think, a big accomplishment for
Yeah.
the commission to be able to put forward to council.
Well, the only thing that I will mention is the overall recommendation would be to incorporate these changes into the updated version of the zoning ordinance, which was reformatted for E-code. So there has been some renumbering of some of the sections. And so we have a reformatted zoning ordinance that we want to plug these changes into, and then we would adopt this all as one amendment. So we have essentially a brand new ordinance. I don't know if we will call it a brand new ordinance or just still an amendment to ordinance 80-2005 at this point. If we do a total overhaul when we have the audit done, then it probably will be called a brand new ordinance of, 2024 or 2025.
I have a question, Jake. You said that you're looking to have somebody come in to do an audit. Do you have a timeline on that? Like, are you looking to put this in place before the audit, like, soon? Or is that just an idea floating around, is have somebody come in and do a complete audit?
Well, I think that we'd engaged Michael Baker, and Jackie can speak a little bit more to that if she'd like, but it's, they have a green light. They have a green light, to undertake this if the funding is available, and I'm not sure what the funding status is. But, they had written a scope, and I think they were going to revisit their scope. But I haven't seen anything yet, so I can't give you a solid timeline on that. I think that based on, where we've been going with our conversation on amendments, one thing that's critical to get these amendments sent to council now is that the short-term rental, as one particular use, we need to get those standards updated so that there's clear guidance on approving properties in R1 and R1A at a minimum. So some of these other recommendations are certainly going to be helpful immediately. And the E-code version, needs to be adopted immediately so that we've got essentially a brand new book where we're not making references to two separate ordinances, kind of a
Right.
PDF from last year, E-code version that's currently on the city's website. So we do need to get this done now, and then we'll see what happens with the other effort.
Mr. Chairman, then I'd make an enthusiastic motion to recommend these to the council.
Council, second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, more enthusiastically, aye.
Yeah.
All right, planning and neighborhood resources update.
Hello again. I have a lot to update you on. As you are hearing, there's a lot going on in the planning and neighborhood resource part of the department. I'm going to start with sort of my projects where I'm leading, and then go into some of the other updates of some of the other people in our department so that you're just aware of what's going on. First, I'd like to start with the DCNR Comprehensive Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. The RFP closed last week. There was a one-week extension, and we received 4 proposals. I have not looked at them yet, but my plan is to hopefully, with some other staff, score them and do interviews at the beginning of next week for our maybe top 2, I would say, candidates. We also have we need to kind of decide upon our budget for that. We did receive a $50,000 grant from DCNR where it was a 1-to-1 match with the city, but we're not required to pick the lowest bidder. So the city needs to determine what, in fact, their total budget costs will be for that project. Today, the East Bayfront Greenway Trail public event, the first public event at MCRC is at 554 East 10th Street. This is from 6 to 8. Attendees will be asked to share their ideas about what they would like in this local park, how they might use it, how they would get there, safety concerns, and other ideas. Neighborhood resource team, our neighborhood resource team passed out about 300 flyers to people in that neighborhood. We've engaged with our different community organizations, and we've also utilized the neighborhood, or the refugee and immigrant liaison at the city, and the, I'm missing Daryl Craig, the community liaison at the city, to try to get as many people as we can for this important project. So if you can come out tonight and show your support and participate, that would be great, from 6 to 8. Last week, we're nearing the end of the 12th Street Corridor project. I appreciate your participation in that, and we had a working session with planning commissioners. Last week, we had one of our probably last engagement sessions with the business folks again at the chamber. And we had a pretty good attendance, not only from the businesses along the corridor, but some of the members that are on our members, chamber members. We received a lot of good feedback from them, and the consultants are now taking all of this information, synthesizing it, and hopefully we'll have a draft plan actually in the next week and a half, which we'll be able to have you review and comment on that plan. The project is substantially completed, hopefully substantially completed by the end of this month. There's going to be some time for revisions, and then obviously, hopefully, adoption of that plan. Safe Streets and Roads for All, which is the DOT project that we have. We've kicked that project off, and we have our first safety working session, which is about, I think it's almost 20 members from different varying organizations, EMTA, Arts and Culture, Redevelopment Authority, Erie Insurance, Parking Authority, Police, you name it, those important people are on it. However, just want to make the public aware and you aware that this is the working and steering committee, but along the project, there will be areas where the public and hopefully the commissioners and other boards can engage in this project and again, make recommendations and provide comments. So the steering committee will guide the project and be the driving force, but we will also have certain engagement pieces along the way.
Sorry for interrupting, how was the steering committee, how were the members identified, or I guess, how was that arrived
Sure.
at?
So our consultant, Kittleson, he is the project lead has worked on many of these projects, not Vision Zero and Safe Streets and Roads for All. So he has, through his experience, has come up with those that need to be part of the process or part of the safety working group, so that when we hopefully get the implementation money, those that have been part of the process from the beginning, we're able to act quickly when we do the implementation. So we have, it's not just organizations that you would think of. We have a representative from the Disability Roundtable, like I said, Erie Arts and Culture, Neighborhood Growth Partnership. It's pretty spread out. So, but it's not targeting, neighborhood groups specifically, but those engagement pieces will be part of that also.
Can you share, obviously not right now, but can you share, I guess, who the members are of steering committee, just out of curiosity, and are those meetings that we can at least observe, just, fly on the wall type thing, not as contributors necessarily, but more just to understand the process and what's going on?
I don't see why not. We will have a presentation. The consultant has put together a presentation. All of that should really be on our landing page, so just like we did for 12th Street. It's been very transparent for 12th Street, and we certainly could share all the information. At this particular meeting, it's going over what the purpose of the project is, the intentions, schedule, process, all of that. So it's kind of more informative, but I'm hoping to have some kind of landing page or place for it to land so that it's transparent and all the information is public knowledge, as was 12th. Let's see, I also have an update, not an update, but just wanting you to know that since Aaron Carey's departure, Brian King, who's the director of IT, and myself have been involved in kind of the transition of the digital software management in the interim. That's really, we've taken that on and tried to continue to progress the project or the integration of this software. Really, Aaron Carey has set it up for us to hopefully not fail, so I have to give her credit. We are right now in the process of doing the rental registration configuration, which is taking kind of a long time because it is a very complex program. We also have a third party, BIU, who handles our inspections. So we're trying to figure out what their workflow is, what the city's workflow is, and how we can integrate those two together in this new system. At this moment, the schedule is still to go live in the fall with testing through the summer. Fall meaning probably October, I would say. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that we are interviewing for a data analyst / software administrator now. The job description has changed a bit, and that person who comes on would be managing the software rollout and all of what we're doing in the interim, or what Aaron Carey was doing moving forward. So we're in the process. We have our first interview for that position on Monday. So that concludes kind of some of the things. There's a few others, but any questions in regards to those projects, and I'll move on to the next updates. No? Good. Okay. Just wanted to give you met Heather Olson. I don't know if that was the first time that you've met her. She's the historic preservation planner / planner. She's also working on some planning projects also and involved in the East Bayfront Greenway Trail. She's involved in the Erie Downtown Partnership Energized Spaces project. She is a licensed architect by trade, which is a great skill to have in our planning department. Like she mentioned, we will be kicking off in July the citywide historic resource survey, and that will be a 2-year project that includes mapping, surveying historic places and structures, many of which may have been overlooked in the past. And then there'll be a storyboard associated with that engagement, and then all that information will be inputted into the state system for the public. So also we are continuing to hopefully designate local historic places and landmarks. Heather's working on CLG, federally funded grants, as well as local grants. She's working, like I said, with the Erie Downtown Partnership, the HRC board, to adopt the downtown design guidelines that were done by Perspectus from 2022. And she's also closing out the historic building and improvement grant that is now closed. She's closing all of that out, and that's a big undertaking because she also has to do inspections. So, one other update is from the GIS administrator, who's Erin Pence. Just wanted to let you know she's been working on creating mobile data collection applications for the planning, code enforcement, and engineering. These solutions allow for efficient and accurate data collection of text, photos, and location data. These solutions send data directly to digital data storage that can be easily shared across the organization and used to create standardized reports and visual charts and dashboards. So this hopefully will inform our decisions and allow us to communicate to the public, and also internally be able to make data-driven decisions. So those are just a few of the updates I have. Any questions or comments?
That's great work.
Busy, busy,
Yeah.
busy.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you next month.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have any public comment? No. Oh, all right. I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.